Hey Rob, how are you?
Hi, very good, thank you.
Again, this is exactly why we did a trial run, is to see use this technology, and it's taken us probably 42 minutes to get this far, including 30 minutes that we thought we'd take it. Yeah, so I'm just uploading the slides, but first of all, Rob, thanks very much for doing this. You know, it's sort of just our technical support here is just helping us out. Yes, yeah, so Rob, first of all, thanks very much for doing this. You've done something which I've done twice and will never ever do again, and that is write a book. It's probably one of the most, you know, it's absolutely the right thing to do in marketplaces, especially new markets need, a definitive starting point for much of the journey. But it's a very, very hard thing to do is write a book and complete it. You know, the first chapter is very easy, the second one's easy, but the last two or three. So anyway, so congratulations on that. And also it's a fascinating topic. I think, you know, one of the things that people always focus on is that, you know, it's about technology, but actually, you know, I think people start to realize more and more is that technology is part of it, but and then the reason why we're all starting the journey, but everything else is the exciting part and the really probably the challenging part. So we should have a presentation up and running, which is just uploading. So Rob, just in terms of background, Rob, you know, tell us, you know, you were one of the first people I knew who actually had done RPA in terms of had a real story to start off with, and actually had physical hands-on experience on the technology and the business side. So do you want to, while we're uploading the slides, do you want to just give us a bit of background?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it doesn't seem like it, but it was over 5 years ago, which is amazing time frame really, because a lot of the players that are in the market today just weren't around back then. But the product was surprisingly mature. So my role at the time was Lean and Six Sigma, and I was doing a Lean transformation. And of course, when you're looking at processes, you're always looking for what can we do to make them more efficient, and how can we automate them? And often you do, you know, little bits of automation using Excel macros here and there, and you chop sort of a few seconds off here and there, and that's how you automate processes. And you know, sometimes you even get a budget and you can introduce some IT and sort of make a lot greater improvements. But RPA came along, and I was absolutely amazed. You know, first of all, how easy it was to implement. Secondly, it was like, this is incredible. It's going to change the world tomorrow. And of course, 5 years later, it's still going to change the world tomorrow, but it hasn't quite got there. So I guess the first thing has been, it's been a surprise how long it's taken to really catch on. But also, I think there were far fewer players in the field back then. The capabilities were far more limited. And now I think you've got capabilities that fit any size of organization, you know, and any type of problem. And I think that, you know, from that point of view, it's going to change the world tomorrow.
In terms of the book, what was the kind of the motivating factor for, you know, getting all these thoughts and experiences into paper?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, first of all, I've always wanted to write a book. And I think, you know, over the last 20 years, I've started and done the first few pages several dozen times and never really got beyond that far. And really, it grew out of the fact that I really enjoy talking at conferences and talk a lot about RPA at conferences, and it's always sort of very superficial. You've only got a very limited amount of time to give answers to questions. So there was a bit of personal frustration built in that was, I want to provide a much more detailed answer to some of those common questions, and also to address some of the really silly misconceptions as well about RPA. And so it really didn't start as a book. It started as I just started writing a lot and started blogging and writing articles and newsletters and guest blogs and eventually I reached that point where you had so much material. Somebody said to me, "You should write a book," and it's like, I've been thinking about doing that for years, but never on this topic. So yeah, and from that point on, I think it really became a labour of love, and up until the end, exactly as you said, all the way through to the sort of the first draft, it was fantastic. And that was probably the halfway point, as it turned out. And the other half was really hard work. How do you make sure everything's consistent, that it's clear, it's used the right vocabulary, that actually, there's simple things like, sort of the choice of words that can create a lot of misconceptions. And you really, became obsessive compulsive for a little while as it got closer and closer to the end.
Yeah, well, so what? Again, bear with it. I appreciate everyone, tuning in to look at this. I mean, the plan was to have this very structured around slides, but for some reason our technology is against us today. But that's why this is a trial run with friends. I'm going to just go to Plan B here. Perfect. So in terms of well, it's working. You're going to kill me, Rob.
I guess what I can do is I can keep talking. I guess the other thing you mentioned as well, and actually it's the reason the book got called Digital Workforce in the end. I guess all the time I was drafting it really had the most boring name possible, which was just simply RPA. And as the more I wrote and the more the book came together and the structure came together, the more it became clear that it wasn't just about the technology. It was about the organization structure. It was about the processes. It was about the people. It was about adoption and some of the challenges of culture. And so actually, by the time I finished the first draft, RPA was simply the wrong title, because RPA was the enabler throughout the whole book, but it was actually about all these other things as well. And so actually, the title sort of delivered itself in the end. And I think digital workforce is a term that's used quite regularly by all the vendors and many other people in the industry, and it does sum it up quite nicely. And I think the other factor is that you occasionally get asked, where can I go for some more information? And there were relatively few completely independent pieces of work out there that you could direct people towards. All the vendors produce some fantastic material, but of course it's directed at specifically directing them towards their product.
Sorry, bear with me. This is for in terms of technology. Yeah, but I think one of the things I do like about the vendors is that they do to a T explain that this is not about technology. And yes, you're buying technology, but but I actually feel that probably the buyers don't, the actual users just jump straight to the technology they want to, but don't kind of take the bigger picture. So in terms of the challenges you see organizations facing, do you want to talk through the top three?
Yeah, I think the actually you can see on the screen there now. I think the very first challenge that we see the most is that confidence in taking the first step. And I'll be honest, the barriers to entry have fallen. You can start for free. So the cost is no longer a barrier. The range of capabilities that these products provide, from very technical through to very simple for smaller businesses, through to sort of those that are very business technologies, designed for business users. So the range of capabilities is pretty wide as well. So actually, I think there is the right solution for every organization out there. But for some reason, even saying all of that, I think there's a little bit of a lack of confidence in taking that first step. And you see a long gap between the education and this is what it is, this is how you can use it, this is the potential areas in your business that can make a really big difference, compared to the taking that first step and running a pilot and actually getting started. And it's hard to explain why. I think it should be, but it is should be much easier than it is. But I think maybe the second point is one of those reasons, and that is, once you do get started, you do sort of face a lot of cultural challenges. And one of the things I think in the UK that we struggle with is the sort of number of negative headlines that have hit the newspapers. You know, the sort of the rise of the robots and they're here to take your job type messages. So you've got to be very sensitive, I think, now when you start an RPA type project to make sure you're addressing those employee concerns right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I guess my last comment is that, and Ed, you said it sort of earlier, that someone sees this amazing technology and goes, wow, I want one, and jumps straight in. And I do think now, because you do have that breadth of capability, that one of the most important things is to think about, well, which is the one capability I actually need that's going to fit my future needs as well as my current needs, rather than just the first one that happened to come along.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, but I mean, there's so many things in this, you know, the employee change journey, I kind of think is overblown, because, you know, people don't like change generally, but, you know, it's an employees marketplace with very low unemployment globally, especially in key economies. So it's really, the imperative is on the employers to kind of make the workplace a kind of more pleasurable place to turn up to. So the fear factor should not be what it would be if there was 10 years ago in a struggling economy. So I think, you know, but again, ignoring the potential issues is a big problem, but just addressing them head on, getting them out of the way is key. And especially the cost of actually bringing on new people. If people are walking out the door, there's huge, you know, I mean, one organization quoted $30,000 for their cost of recruiting someone. So, you know, with that kind of, you know, investment required for bringing on one new person, you think, well, it's not just cheaper to re-educate your existing staff and reassure them that they're valued.
Yes, yeah, and I guess that's to clarify my point actually, is that I think it's that fear comes from the lack of understanding and knowledge before you start. Once people start to understand what it does for their role and their job and their satisfaction, you more often find people actually really they become super advocates of it once they understand it fully.
Yeah, but what we find with the training side is that there's actually just incredible excitement about the classes. The CIO turned up one of our classes like last Monday. The CEO was meant to turn up, but they were merging with another company. But there is a level of actual excitement, which I think is kind of unparalleled. But it's impossible to ignore the fear factor. So I mean, in terms of your kind of advice about people still with any doubts or uncertainty, what would you be saying to them?
Well, I think that the very first one I mentioned earlier, which is there is the right solution out there for you, but do spend a little bit of time just thinking about what that might be. And there's something for every size of business and every size of budget. But I think really it is a case you should get started, start small and think big. And I think that's that's a real key component, because you really can learn by doing it. It's a very rapid development environment. I think there are lots of debates and arguments about traditional IT methods like waterfall versus agile, etc. My background's lean, which tends to be a little bit more towards the agile side of things, and that works brilliantly with RPA, because you've got those very rapid iterative cycles of development that can deliver improvements and benefits to the business in small slices, but also lower risk, because you're only making small changes with each new iteration. So I think it's very easy to get started. And I think it's the last one is avoiding unrealistic expectations, and this is back to the misconceptions I talked about earlier, is that you run into two extremes. That one of the very first meetings I walked into when I was explaining what RPA was and the different types and how it might help the business, and somebody said, "Oh, this is amazing," and I thought, "Great, I've got them sold." And they said, "We've got this process that all our people really struggle to do. We could automate that." And it was like, my heart sank, because at that point, they hadn't got it. And that's exactly the type of process that would be terrible for RPA, because it has to be very clearly defined and understood. And it also scared me a little bit. It's like, you've got a process that nobody understands. It's like, I'm sure somebody would like to know about that. So yeah, it is this. It's not a magic wand or a silver bullet. It does what it says on the tin very, very well, which is automate, standardized tasks very rapidly, and can provide the volume of business to take really the robot out of the human, because we all do these very repetitive, very mundane tasks every day. And if you can just save a few minutes of a person every day, those benefits will start to add up.
Yeah, and people always think this is cheap, easy, fast. Anyone can do it, and it'll take minutes to change the world. But in reality, that's kind of the wrong starting point. Obviously you find the easy places to start, ideally, but in terms of that's going to solve all your problems across the organization. It's never the case. So I'm a big believer that expectation management is key, especially in the early days. We spend a lot of time with companies that are just coming off the stage where they've had consultants in and are now looking to stand on their own 2 feet. Yeah. There's a lot of nervousness doing that, but they're sitting at the back of a business case that doesn't really justify having ongoing consulting support. So therefore, they have to move to a self-supported model pretty quickly, which is it's good generally. It's good business discipline, but it really exposes them to their kind of really doing it for themselves rather than relying on other people to do it. And that's kind of where it gets scary. So, obviously the book, illustrates your journey personally of what you've learned, but in specifics, what it focused you on in the RPA space or digital workforce space, what did you learn along the way?
Yeah, I think, my first lesson really was that the whole journey takes a lot longer than you can possibly sort of guess. I think, and that's not the actual. Once you get started, I think the opposite is true. You can start to deliver benefits far more quickly than you would expect. But overall, I think bringing everybody along on that journey to getting started and actually sort of dipping their toe in the water takes a lot longer than you would believe. I also think it does bring us back to the book that technology is just the enabler. It's fantastic technology, and what it's capable of is incredible. But it only really works when you've put it together with effective processes and a good organization structure and a clear set of objectives in terms of how you're going to run that business. And I think it's almost like people who struggle with RPA or report problems with RPA projects, it almost feels like they temporarily lost their minds when they saw it. They thought, this is incredible, and ran off and did some RPA and forgot all about those good practices that they'd been doing in their business for years. And actually, all those good practices are still true, particularly as you start to scale. Good practices like, nice, clear, optimized processes, good practices like change control still are important to actually a successful implementation. I think the other one, I'm coming from a lean background as well. This one's interesting because I think lean came out of Japan, and when it first started, it had a lot of Japanese words in the vocabulary, and over time they slowly got softened out of the general usage. And it was a barrier in those early days, and I never really sort of perceived that the RPA had the same jargon and experienced the same problem at the start. But it does, and it does have a problem because everybody is very inconsistent about the vocabulary that they use. I was in a workshop sort of earlier this week, and people used the term, smart automation, intelligent automation, digital process automation. Every variation of the combination of those words that you could believe, and they all meant, in their own way, they all were referring to something specific that they knew they meant, but nobody else did. And I think so. The jargon can be really challenging, and from more of a consulting perspective, one of the early steps is always to try and provide a common understanding, but it's a common vocabulary to be able to have these discussions clearly and not miscommunicate with a common language.
Yeah, I mean, the RPA I always liked because it was kind of reasonably succinct in my mind, but then you realise that it wasn't, what I was hearing and seeing was so different to everyone else, and getting clarity was difficult, and it gets even more challenging when you move to things like AI, which,
Yes.
it's just a blur. It means different things to different people in different sectors. So, any advice in getting around that?
Yes, I think, I think, my first bit of advice is perhaps read the book because that's exactly where I start. What is it? And I spend the whole first chapter talking about what is it, and create a consistent vocabulary that I can then use consistently throughout the rest of the book, which, and at a simplistic level, I think, it does boil down to there are broadly 5 types of automation. The first is the type of automation you've probably seen pre-RPA, which is, macros and things like that, the automation that you see in many of the tools that you have today. There's attended automation, which is the types of automation where it runs alongside the person on the desktop. So you do a bit of the process, the robot does a bit of the process, and it just speeds up the mundane tasks out of what you're doing. And then you've got the unattended automation, which is that it can actually do the whole process in the background in a black box without any human interaction needed at all. And so it can run the whole process uninterrupted. And of course, once you can do that, you can also start to run 24/7, for example. And so instead of just running the process 9 to 5, you can now gain some benefits from the fact that the robot doesn't have holidays and doesn't have to go to bed and go to sleep. Then I think you've got the topic of chatbots, and sort of the ease of communication that they provide. And I think, chatbots and virtual assistants and all the different names that are out there are becoming much easier to implement, particularly at the simple level. And they provide quick access into being then automating activities based on your voice. And then, of course, finally, you mentioned it there, is the topic of artificial intelligence, which I think, is simply an example of a different style of programming. In the past, we used to have to program things and know every outcome in order to put the program in place. The thing about machine learning, of course, is you don't know everything and it learns it. So the programming is what's there to learn from the data that it's given. And so that's the big difference about machine learning and artificial intelligence. And that opens up gateways to lots of different things that would have required a lot of programming effort in the past, but now can actually sort of make some of those tasks much simpler. The most common being OCR, but I mean, you even see things like third parties just selling you a pre-learnt module and a pre-learnt algorithm that understands invoices or understands receipts. So you don't even have to do it yourself. You can always buy it off the shelf at the supermarket and say, I'll have that bit of machine learning and plug it into my RPA. So that's quite exciting now, because I think that's where RPA will lead you to in the longer term.
Yeah, no, that's the exciting part. I mean, again, that's probably a bit of a RobFest conference on that. Talking about in terms of the struggles we've got, just with RPA alone, is I always find just keeping a fence around the conversation and not letting people drift into kind of what could happen in the future and the next steps, just focusing on a very clear starting point. So summary, your 30 seconds giveaway.
Yeah. I think, number one, absolutely, the barriers have fallen. There are options out there for you, big and small, enterprise and small business, and the right ones there, the right price and the right capability for you. So get started now. And I guess that comes with a warning, which is if you're not starting, your competitors probably are. So, to keep up with your competitors now, you need to be doing this. And then I think the last one is actually, we drifted into that in the last question, which is, I think you do RPA well, it will give you a platform that is the gateway to starting to take advantage of some of these more advanced techniques that come from AI.
Perfect. So obviously there's a ton of materials out there. One of the purposes of these webcasts was to make it succinct and easy to get access to more detailed information. But also, we really want to, people to have a chance to ask any questions at all. if there's things you'd like to cover, please let you know. So, Rob, have you got questions there down the right hand side?
I have. I'm reading. I'm probably doing this the wrong way around, but I'm reading bottom up at the moment. But there's a chap Hemant up there sort of say I find a lot of resistance to introducing RPA at workplace, mostly from management, and I think this not uncommon, and actually it doesn't tend to be so much senior management as often the middle management. You do tend to find that the people who use RPA love it. The people at a senior level can see the opportunity it will provide the business and why they might want to use it. But middle management tend to be a tougher nut to crack because they've worked through their career to build up a team of people, and they now actually sort of measure their worth, if you like, by the number of people that they're sort of looking after, rather than actually the output that they're producing, which the digital workforce, of course, will provide them. So it's a massive, absolutely massive challenge, and I think the way that I've seen organisations sort of circumvent that when they've struggled to get started has been to be able to run a small pilot or activity within the business and then just showcase it. So it's a very naughty way of doing it, but showcase it when the opportunity arises to sort of get that broader recognition of what it's capable of, and then get the top-down buy-in that you absolutely do need to be able to then have a successful RPA project. I mean, I think a colleague of mine, sort of uses the phrase, if you can't change the people, change the people, which is a bit extreme, but it is sort of the problem that is being faced there.
I'm also sympathetic. People do. I mean, we're all sort of imbued in the RPA world, this kind of exciting sort of digital journey, but in reality, any middle management leader is going to have multiple challenges, and this is kind of one of many or another sort of thing to be addressing. So it's it's never they can never devote the focus that we can as specialists. In terms of selling it internally, Hemant had a question about how you actually sell this internally without selling it too much. My response is always you have to sell it. I mean, this is any organization needs people who actually can articulate and basically just sell internally. That's what we do day in, day out. Maybe there's no commercial transaction, obviously, but really you have to learn how to sell this. And I think a lot of what we talk about is when you're building an RPA strategy, you're educating and you're showing people a vision. So by it is selling in just a different format. Have you seen anything working specifically, Rob, around how to sell it internally?
Funny, I mean, I guess there's two things spring to mind. One is, I think, particularly in the early days when there was less understanding of what automation was about, you saw a lot more of the finance and accounting teams using RPA. So it sort of grew up through there. And that's not a surprise because you sort of, the larger the business, the more simple transactional processes exist within finance and accounting functions. So I think, so one string to the bow is go and talk to your finance guys because they normally have some money as well. I mean, that's the good thing about finance and accounting. But I do think then the bigger picture is about sort of a virtuous circle, if you like, of sort of get some experience and then showcase that experience, then bring more people on and start in those small bite-sized chunks. And a lot of organizations follow that methodology. It's a variation on the methodology that's described in the lean startup, really, which is simply build, measure, learn, and you're constantly going through that cycle of learning as you go, but delivering something in each cycle. So you can start really, really small with these tools.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And finance is a great place to start. The Lean Startup book should be compulsory reading for everyone because it's got a mentality shift that can be used for startups as well as kind of in big organizations. But it really is just getting started and not worrying too much about all the things that can go wrong or being perfect off with. But it's a game changing perspective. So we've kind of achieved what we want to achieve in terms of doing this in 30 minutes. conscious that technology wasn't, or the technology is probably perfect. Our knowledge of the technology while we were doing this for the first time, as a trial run. We'll edit the video and get it recorded and get it set up and put it online. There'll be a transcript coming out as well. If anyone's got any questions at all, just reach out to me directly or Rob directly, and we'll be able to help you more from there. Okay, so thanks very much.
Yes, thanks, Ed, and also thank you to Patrick, who's obviously read the book in the comments. I've just read that message. So well done. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Right, take care, guys.
Bye bye.
Thanks.